Shalom, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Daily Bread, where we discuss the weekly Torah portion. This week's Parashat is Parashat Shelach, which is the fourth Parashat of the book of Bamidbar, also called Numbers, and it's called Shelach, which means send you. In this week's Parashat, we basically have the spies sent to check out the Promised Land. They bring back the evil report. They get in trouble from Yodewaheh. Then we get the laws of the mincha and drink offerings, the first dough offering, and then we have the sins of ignorance and the command for the tzitzis. So a lot of different stuff going on in here. My message for this year is called Deviance and Conformity. And this week's message is really about how that relates to following Elohim and what it means to Israel as they come out of Mitzrayim or Egypt into the lifestyle of the Torah and how that applies to us. So we'll dig in. We'll look at a couple things first. First, we'll look at a few definitions. Deviance is defined as differing from the norm or from the accepted standards of a society. And then conformity means compliance with standards, rules, or laws, behavior in accordance to socially accepted conventions or standards. So what you have is both of these are really, it's interesting because they're relative, because what one person might think is deviance, another person or society might not. So depending on, these rules can only be applied depending on where the majority is. So if the majority of the society is wicked, then deviance to that would be like a prophet who comes to tell them to repent. And conformity would be to be wicked if you were in a wicked society. A great example of this, but then the funny thing about societies is they change. So at times Israel has been wicked, and the deviance would be the prophets. And at other times, Yisrael was righteous, where the deviants would be the wicked ones. So when we look at how this relates to this week's parasha, we start off with the spies. They're going to go to the Promised Land and essentially look at it. Now, the Promised Land has an interesting symbolic meaning, the Ramez, or the spiritual definitions. The Promised Land, as I understand it, would represent the body that keeps the Torah, basically. This is the Promised Land. This is the goal. Mashiach said he was the goal of the Torah. And I believe he also represented the Promised Land, which was that all men were formed from the dust of the earth, the land. We were made from the land. And the Promised Land would be that flesh, that land that keeps all the Torah, which is seen in Mashiach, as he was the Promised Land, but it also can include us. And this brings that concept that we are the body or members of Mashiach. Same thing, this land. Well, a land is made up in the sense of obedience to Torah, of anybody willing to accept the authority of the Torah. That becomes the kingdom that that authority rules over. Just as if you're an American and you go to another country, you're still an American when you go over there, because you are subject to all the laws of your culture and your country, even while you're in another country. So you don't have to be in the physical country to be a member of that country. And so when we look at all the people who accept the authority of Yodewaheh and of his Torah, then this, in my opinion, represents Israel. This represents the Promised Land. So with that kind of as a preface, we'll take a look and see in the Ramez, or spiritual definitions, what this means when these spies, these leaders or great men in Israel, were sent to look at the Promised Land, to get a view of it and to experience it first. So before all of Israel, here's these great leaders who get to experience it. That in itself is interesting, because what you'll see is this is a lot like studying the Torah. I think that there's a lot of people who fail to study, who don't put much effort into their studies, And, putting years of study, it produces fruit, but that fruit just isn't going to come to you. In our society, everything is free. It's what I call reward without responsibility. Because you can go down to the store, you can have a breakfast with a glass of orange juice, some potatoes, some eggs, and some fruit. You don't have to do anything for that. You can go down to the store today and just pick it up and come back and make it. You didn't have to care for the chickens to build the pens and do all this so that you could get those eggs. You didn't have to plant the crops of potatoes and wait and water them and wait for them to grow, and so that you could harvest them and then finally sit down and have your potatoes on your plate. And then you said, well, wait, now we need cheese. I got to go make cheese. We just go, the type of meal that an average American has for breakfast it might have taken 6 months or a year to produce everything there. So if you compare that to how people were in society before, you realize that the only person who ate like that was somebody who did a tremendous amount of work in each of those categories to have all those elements on his plate to be able to sit down and enjoy that kind of meal. And we don't deserve to have that kind of meal because we didn't do any of the work. In our society, we want to have somebody else's do the work, and we'll just come in and we'll buy it, and we'll be able to appreciate and enjoy the things that normally only somebody who put in a great deal of work would be able to enjoy. So we get out of sync with the things that we have and that we're able to have because they require no responsibility on our parts. And in spiritual world, I believe it's the same thing. A lot of organizations and religions come together, and the way the model works is all the little sheep, all the little followers, they sit down in the pew and they listen to the guy who does the Torah study or the Bible study if it's Christian or whatever it is. They don't waste their time doing that. So you go do it and we'll just come and listen to what you have to say. We want to get basically the rewards of it without the responsibility of actually having to do the study. And of course this leads to trouble because people can deceive people. People can be wrong and not know they're wrong. And if all you do is come and accept what they're giving, then you're at their mercy because you have no idea. You can't verify anything because you didn't do your own study. So we see that in this week's Parashat, we have Mashiach. We have the Promised Land, which is a model of being able to see Mashiach, see what it looks like to see that promise, that goal of Torah. I think this is what the apostles and the disciples were able to see. They kind of get a vision of the Promised Land. We also see that in Torah study, the leaders, spiritual leaders, get to kind of go and see the Promised Land, see what it looks like. What's this goal that we're trying to get to? What's this going to look like? You see this by reading the Bible. And the problem is that 10 out of 12 of the people who went in and saw it came back and slandered it and had evil to say about it and actually ended up discouraging people from doing it. And we can see this in the same way in the leaders who have come in and have read the Bible, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be hard for them to read the Bible and not see that they need to obey, not to see all the commands and the verses that are hard to get past when it says, faith without works is dead, and yet people come out preaching things like, it's just faith alone, and don't try and earn salvation. You're trying to do works, and they speak against works. These are really what I call the discouragers of the brethren. These are people saying, well, no one can keep all the law. Nobody's perfect. We can't do all that. We don't need to do all that. That's been done away with. No matter how you package it up, they are people who've gone in, made the choice for themselves by looking at the word saying, gosh, this either means that I have to do all this stuff or that I don't have to. Well, they decide very conveniently that it can't mean that we have to do all this stuff. That'd be too hard. It must be, just like seeing the giants. So here we were promised this promised land. We were given this great land. And I thought I was going to come in and there was going to be a little bow on it with mansions already set up for us and everything. And the spies get up there and they look in the promised land and they go, wait a minute. There's like some giants in here that don't look like they would want to leave quietly. So here we have this promise of this promised land that we're going to get, but we realize that there's a responsibility on us to do something in order to take it. And they refused to do that. Now, it's interesting that they basically went in and did two things when they went to the promised land. Number one, they took the fruit of the land back, right? And in Hebrew, peri, which means fruit, also means reward. So it's interesting that they took the rewards back, but this kind of stood out to me like odd. Why would you take the fruit of the land back if indeed you had already saw that there are giants there and decided you're not going to go into the land? You're not willing to go fight these giants if you're really grasshoppers in their sight. And they're so giant, and you're not going to go into the promised land. Why bother bringing the fruit back? I mean, at the end, if you walked up, you saw some giants, you said, hey, I'm not doing this. There's no way. Let's go back to Mitzrayim. Just pack it up, turn around, and go back. But it was interesting that they took the great fruit of the land, the grapes, the cluster of grapes back. And I see that a lot with religion nowadays, is that you see that people want to take the rewards of the Bible, that the Bible offers, and following God and Israel, and whatever you want to call it, whether it's the Christian salvation or it's the Messianic, part of being part of Israel, or the Jews being part of Israel, and all the promised land and all the things that have been. Everybody wants to bring back a cluster of the fruit of the rewards, but at the same point, the other side of their mouth, they're saying, when it comes to that responsibility of having to go in and remove all those giants, I'm not interested in that. But how do they still believe that they're going to be able to enjoy the fruit? You can't take the fruit, enjoy the fruit of the good land, unless you go in and take that land. And this goes to the heart of this concept of deviance and conformity, because people are kind of caught in between these two things. They want the rewards without the responsibility. They, just like when Israel wanted to go up after they already disobeyed, and then they still wanted to go up. They wanted that promise of the promised land, because now they're getting punished. And it comes straight back to obedience. They were supposed to obey the first time, they didn't. Then they were told, don't go up there. Yodewahe is not with you. And why would they go up? If their heart was to obey, and it was not for the reward of the promised land, I think that kind of revealed the heart of those people. They wanted the reward of the promised land. So now they were not only wanting to not be punished, but they probably wanted the reward and said, we're going to go up. But he's saying, wait a minute, God doesn't want you to do this now. But you see, the common denominators, they didn't care to obey God. Whether it was to go up or not to go up, they didn't want to obey God. So every other desire that they had was outside of the obedience of God, which I think is at the heart of Torah. The heart of Torah is to obey Elohim. Just when they came out of Mitzrayim from Pesach, they weren't given the law yet, but it was that they obeyed, and they put the blood on the doorpost, and they did the basic things that he told them to do at that time, and that is what saved them. Now it's almost, you hardly see that in the Messianic movement. You hardly see that anywhere, that this whole concept is about obedience. You see all these other things that people want: salvation, forgiveness for sins, entering into the kingdom, great reward. They want the promised land. You can go across Jew, Messianic, and Christian, and everybody's got something in it for them. Very few of them have in it that they want to obey, to learn to have righteous judgment and be changed, to be like Elohim. Is not high on the reasoning and the goal of why people keep Torah, and that is sad. So we get to past this concept of reward without responsibility. We see that even with Rahav and the half-Torah, she didn't have to have a reward in order to hide the spies. She did that first, and then she was offered reward. But even the reward, it was said that if she didn't obey and do these certain things, then her and her family not only wouldn't be rewarded, they would end up being killed. Their blood would be upon them. And so we see this pattern. We see with Israel, they wanted to return to Mitzrayim. And this is almost like this whole concept of going and seeing the promised land, experiencing it. And then they rejected it. And it's this concept that they kind of wanted to return to Mitzrayim, is this concept that we want to return to ignorance. We were brought out of Mitzrayim. We were shown, these great signs and wonders, and we're learning about God and what he wants. And now we don't want what God wants from us. because they were selfish in the first place. Now they just want to go back to Mitzrayim because it's about what they want. Oh, the leeks, the onions, oh yeah, great. That has nothing to do with following Elohim. It's about serving yourself. And that's where a lot of people are in religion. Religion becomes part of their life. It's something that makes them feel good. They get a social aspect of it. They get salvation. They get to feel like they're the promised people. No matter what it is, it's all these other things. None of them have anything to do with changing your character or truly following Elohim, even when it's not very fun to follow Elohim, when there's responsibilities to come along with that. And so what did they do? They wanted to destroy the land, in a sense, by slandering it, by making it into something that it wasn't. That's like graffitiing the great land. It's slandering. It's talking wrong about it. And Caleb and Yahushua weren't willing to do that. They said, no, there are giants there, but we can overcome them. And it's the same way religion and religious people do with Mashiach and the Torah. Even the Messianics many times claim, well, we have the Torah, and yet at the other side of their mouth they say, oh, but we don't really have to keep it. It doesn't have anything to do with salvation, and that's really the focus. So in one sense they say, well, as long as it's giving me something good so I can brag that I'm better than a Christian because I've got the Torah, and I'm better than a Jew because I've got Mashiach, and they miss that. And that all makes me feel good. And what doesn't come down to is this concept that on the other hand, once they're not getting something from it, they say, well, okay, but I don't really have to do all that. I don't have to. I just do it because I want to, because I am saved. I hear all this kind of rhetoric, and it makes no logical sense. And I don't believe it lines up with the Torah. The Torah is about obeying Elohim, period. I mean, no matter how people want to twist it any other ways, it's a book about those people who've obeyed Yodewai and those people who haven't, and what the difference is from start to finish, all through mankind. And we see that people who don't like that, who choose not to obey God, they want to destroy the messengers, just like they wanted to kill Yahushua and Caleb, because they said, wait a minute, that's not the message. Here's the promised land, and we can do it. And yet if you go out and say, well, here's the Torah, it's all about obedience, and we're supposed to obey, and we can do it. We could be exactly like Mashiach, and we can keep all the Torah. So, oh no, all the discouragers of the brethren come out because they've simply chosen not to try because they think it's too hard. And now they want to convince everybody else how we shouldn't, how we can't, how that was never the purpose, and all these other things. I've heard all kinds of things like this. So what happens is they've spoken ill, and because of that, they won't be allowed the rewards of the promised land. The punishment isn't what happens next in the Parashat. The punishment is decided upon them, and the people who spoke ill were destroyed, and with a plague, and then the other ones were forced to walk around in the wilderness, and they were never going to see the promised land. And but they were among the people who were going to go in the promised land. That's what's funny, because I see that same thing today. There's all kinds of people in every congregation. You'll go up and you'll start talking to them. It's like, hey, what up, Ahi? Toda Rabbah, they're throwing all this, hey, buddy, no, my brothers and sisters, until you start talking about the Torah. And then if you start saying, hey, I think we're supposed to be doing all this and that, and all of a sudden, oh, man, no, you don't have it right. You're trying to obey all that law, or you're trying too hard, You missed the promised land. We're already there. We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. You're trying to go too far. They want to say that basically they represent the promised land and how they're acting and how they live, and that you've gone too far because you're trying to be too righteous. You're trying to earn something. You're trying to do all this and that. They want you to think that you walked past the promised land and didn't quite see it. It was them. And what you're trying to do is you're actually getting away from the promised land by trying to be righteous. And I think that's a bunch of garbage. I think that the Torah teaches us, and we're gonna walk this journey our entire life, and we're gonna walk towards that place, and hopefully we'll get close. Hopefully we'll do the best that we can before Mashiach comes back. Now this goes to this kind of deviance and conformity. Just because the Pharisees got in and claimed the land, just like as people are in the land of Israel today, and they're claiming that they are Israel. And just because somebody says they're Jewish, even the Torah says, woe unto them who say they are Jews and are not. The Jews have converted people to Judaism who are not Jewish, even by heritage or blood. They go through the mother, which makes no sense because the whole concept of the seed of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, it doesn't say the seed of Sarah, Rachel, and anything like that. It doesn't. It isn't the seed of the woman. The bloodline doesn't go through the woman. The bloodline goes through the father. I think that's almost so apparent that I don't understand how it got twisted to be that you weren't Jewish unless you were Jewish through the mother. That makes no sense, according to the Torah, in my opinion. But the whole point is, I could buy a ticket and buy a piece of land over there in Israel, and that doesn't mean that I'm the one that was spoken of, that this is fulfillment of prophecy, because I went to Israel and bought a house. Do I think it's significant that Israel's come back into the, I wouldn't say Israel, but the people, the Jews, as we know them, have come back to the land? Yeah, sure. It's probably significant, but do I think that represents the fulfillment of prophecy? No, because the prophecies that most of them talk about also say that it's a return to Torah, and there's things like that women won't be, barren, and there won't be no weapon that can be raised against you, and no disease. Those are the signs, and those signs aren't apparent. There's a lot of people, excuse me, who don't keep the Torah there at all, who are secular, who are homosexual, who are, it's all kinds of everybody, who are there. So the signs aren't there for it to be the what many people point to in text. They kind of forget the other part of the text that describes how we'll know that event happened. Anyway, what you see, that goes again with reward without responsibility as the same concept. But you see this concept of this wanting to return to ignorance, and you can't do that. They want to return to Mitzrayim. You can't unsee these things. It kind of reminds me of the verse where it says that in Ezekiel, I'll try and pull it up here. It says it's talking basically about the righteous man who turns to wickedness. And when he turns to wickedness, his righteousness isn't going to save him anymore, because now he's chosen to wickedness. And the wicked person who turns to righteousness, that his wickedness will be forgotten, because the whole thing is who you are and what you're doing matters. You can't necessarily stockpile those, and even that goes to the reason why people will do that. Are you trying to just stockpile enough righteous works, blah, 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 that you can spend it later? No. I think that's the wrong goal. The goal is to actually be righteous all the time. Mashiach is the goal, 100% of righteousness. If we do that, then I think we've achieved something. And it isn't so that we can pay off something here or there. It's for who we want to be. And that goes into the concept of possession versus function. A lot of times people want to possess things that are religious. They want to possess Mashiach. Oh, we have Jesus, or we have Yeshua, or, or the Jews are, we're Jewish. It's themselves that is the possession. We are Yisrael. Or we have the Torah. Messianics claim we have the Torah and we have Jesus. Everybody's claiming what they have. But the problem is that it isn't about possession. It's not about possessing salvation. It's not about possessing the Torah. It's not about possessing Mashiach or not Mashiach. It's about the function. What is the function of Mashiach in your life? Is he your guide that you look and you say, okay, every action I'm trying to act like Mashiach? Then that possession has a function that lives out in your life. It isn't just something in your back pocket. It's something that continually changes you every moment and impacts you. The Torah, it's not about having the Torah. Oh, you say that you believe in the Torah or that you have a Torah. It's how does that function in your life? And it's the same as saying, oh, I'm Israel. I'm a descendant of Israel. Well, who cares? How does that function in your life? Because if you really want to see Israel, all you'd have to do is take a look at who's living the Torah. Because to me, that is Israel. That's true Israel. They don't need to have a name badge. It isn't about what they tell, who they tell you they are. It's about that you can, as it says, know a tree by its fruit. Not because it has a sign on it, but because you see that there's apples there, you know it's an apple tree. Whereas if it has no apples, but the sign says it's an apple tree, you have no idea what it is. It really doesn't matter what it says it is. And we see, so function is greater than possession. And, the Torah portion says, this shall have that. It goes into the minka and says that the minka, each of these offerings, the lamb shall have this minka and this drink offering. The bull shall have this minka and this drink offering. It says about the stranger, that the stranger shall have the law. The stranger and the homeborn shall each have the Torah. The Torah is what's in common. Not whether they were stranger or homeborn, didn't matter. What was the connecting piece and the identifier was that they had the Torah. And we see this. And those people who go through now and seek out, like Caleb and Yahushua, to do what's right, to do the difficult things, to take on those giants, those difficult things that are required of you in the Torah, that may cause you to lose your job to keep the Sabbath. It may cause you to lose your spouse because she or he doesn't agree with you. It may cause you to lose money. It may cause you to suffer ridicule, lose family members, lose sleep if you get up to do your prayers. It's all, you might not be able to eat out at a restaurant anymore. There's all kinds of ways you can sacrifice. No more Christmas, all this. This is a road where you're going to give up a lot of things, I believe, if you're following the Torah. But as it says, at the end is a great reward. You may have to defeat the giants, but at the end is the fruit, the great reward. And that takes us to Psalms 19, 9 through 11. It says, the fear of Yodewaheh is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of Yodewaheh are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired than gold, yea, than much fine gold, sweeter than the honey and the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. So this talks about the fear. This talks about the warnings that they are. But at the same time, there's reward, just like with Raha in the half Torah. So anyway, the last section we'll talk about is the fact of the man who is gathering trees on the Sabbath. Some translate it kindling or sticks, but the word eitz means trees. You can take that as you want. We don't know exactly what he was doing, but we do know that children of Israel didn't know what to do about it. And they weren't able to pass clear judgment on it. So Moshe asked Yodewaheh, who said to put him to death by stoning him. And what this really shows us is that Elohim will judge his people. And in the end, whether it's wheat or tares, whether we're whether we're doing right or wrong, or we're worried about what other people are doing right or wrong, and who has the right theology, Elohim will judge his people. And, whether you're a deviant in the sense that you're a deviant to Yodewaheh, to his Torah, and you're rebelling against it, or and you've conformed to what everybody else says we never had to do those things. All of Israel was conforming to wickedness. That doesn't make it right. Or whether you are a deviant from the group of people telling you you're doing too much. You don't have to do that. And whether you're conforming ultimately to the kingdom and to the Torah, which is the goal. Conforming to the image of Elohim, which is Mashiach, the promised land, the living of all the commandments. These are things for us to contemplate and to evaluate. I think anybody who wants to be a follower of Yodewaheh really needs to be both a deviant and a conformist. This is a difficult thing, because to be able to fully conform and submit is difficult. And to have the ability then to turn and be totally rebellious to the ways of the world and all the people who want to knock you off track. how could somebody who is so strong be so weak? And I think that blend of those things is necessary, because otherwise you get a lot of people like now, oh, they're zealous. They're zealous. I meet them all the time. They're zealous for whatever they believe the theology of God is. But they're not willing to conform. The people who think they know so much aren't willing to humble themselves to conform to other people's ideas and to what can be the truth of the Torah many times. So they're strong, represented by the deviant, to be unlike the rest of the society, and they're going to follow God no matter what, and they're going to do all these extreme things, but they're not able to conform and submit and humble themselves when someone else comes along and says, hey, I'm glad you're zealous, but I don't think you have that quite right. And or you have the other people who are all the heart of the conformist. They're able to just follow what someone else says, but they can't stand up for their own 2 feet like a deviant. They can't stand against the flow. They're sucked into what everyone else thinks, and whatever everyone else is doing, that's what they're going to do. And I think to be a great follower, you need to be a deviant. You need to be able to be a great deviant, a deviant from society and wickedness, and at the same time a great conformist who can submit all, have no opinion of your own other than what is spoken by the Torah. So that's my message for this year, Deviance and Conformity. Hope it's been a blessing. Until next week and next Parashat, I will say Shalom.